Thank you for joining us today on the show. We've got a lot to get to today. So let's talk about and start our show with talking about what's happening in Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine is one of the greatest failures of Western media of all time. I mean, you can stack this up really against any of the major media coverage of any of the major conflicts in world history, and this one probably takes the cake because there's such a proliferation of the internet, maybe. Or maybe it's just that this is so focused right now from the NATO powers to make sure that this disinformation continues. Continuing our coverage of the stories that you won't see in the Western media today. Today is May 2nd. Today marks the anniversary of sorts. I don't know if you call them anniversaries when they're horrible, but today is an anniversary. You see, 8 years ago on May 2nd, 2014, arguably where all of these lies started. You see, dozens of people were leading peaceful protests, right? They were outside of the Ukrainian government offices and Ukrainian government building, the trade building in Odessa. And here's some video. This is on top of a building. This is what happened. These people that were outside of this building were rounded up, murdered, burned alive inside the Odessa Trades Union building at the hands of the so-called Ukrainian nationalists. This is when the camera swung around to actually catch the mob descending on these peaceful protesters. Now, the police received orders from the Ukrainian government to stand down, do nothing at the time. That's what they were told. This was months after the regime change, the new regime installed by NATO and the Obama administration. Yes, a puppet government. Now, the peaceful pro-Russian protesters at the time had set up a signature drive. That's what they did. They set up a signature drive that was outside of this building and to get referendums for signatures, to drive to gather signatures. They had tents set up to take those signatures. That's when the Ukrainian nationalists stormed the plaza and attacked. The images are horrible. And here's just one of the images you can see here. People forced into the building. Fires were set. And of course, you probably know the rest. I mean, how many people watching right now know this story? Know what happened on May 2nd, 2014? These people didn't make it out of this building alive. In fact, hundreds of bodies discovered in the basement of this building, more hundreds killed out on the plaza. And the police stood by and did absolutely nothing about it. Now, the NATO world was silent. The entire Western world was silent about that. The United States was silent, mostly. Now, here's Marie Harf. Do you remember Marie Harf? She was the State Department spokeswoman, the former CIA analyst. She came to the podium on that Monday morning following this massacre. Here's how she trotted into that little press briefing. No problem.
Hello, welcome to the Daily Press Briefing. Happy Monday.
Hi, everybody.
I have a few items at the top, and then I am happy to open it up for all of your questions. First, the United States is pleased to welcome the delegation of the Syrian National Coalition for Revolutionary and Opposition Forces, which arrived yesterday in Washington, D.C. and is visiting here through May 14th.
She then spent the first 10 minutes attacking Republican Speaker John Boehner at the time, and then for the next 50 or so minutes didn't mention one word about Ukraine on this Monday morning. It wasn't until 56 minutes later and 16 seconds, I counted. It was 56 minutes and 16 seconds into the press conference that a reporter asked her about this. Watch this.
Go ahead.
As the number of casualties in the east of Ukraine is rising, does the U.S. still support Kiev's action against the east?
Support what? I'm sorry, you cut out.
Kiev's action against the east.
Kiev's actions, which actions are you referring to?
The anti-terrorist operation against the protesters.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what actions are you talking about? Like, was there nothing else that happened in the past 2 days? I have no idea what you're talking about. How about the hundreds of people that were just killed? Ring a bell? What actions are you talking about by the Ukrainian government? I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it.
In the east.
What we've said is that we have clearly said the Ukrainian government has showed great restraint in the face of overwhelming challenges, but that they also have a responsibility to maintain law and order for their own people. I think that's probably as much as I want to say on that. And that the onus really is on the Russian government to pull back, to pull their folks out of eastern Ukraine, and to take de-escalatory steps as we move towards the elections, which need to happen on the 25th.
So it's about Russia. It was about Russia. These people holding peaceful protests outside, gathering signatures. It was about Russian forces.
But Russia should not have let them do that.
Right. Russia should
Russia
not have
let them do that, and they got killed, so that one's on them.
Right, exactly. So Harf put forward the bullshit line, claiming that the onus was on Russia for this massacre. What? Yeah, it was their fault. Here she is again, explaining it in more detail.
What Kiev is doing now, does it qualify as restraint?
Well, absolutely. Kiev has shown enormous restraint. And if you're referring to what happened on Friday in Odessa, obviously I put out a statement about that on Friday, but any loss of life is horrible, and we understand that there will be an investigation. The Prime Minister has actually taken punitive action against some of the police folks who led the police forces in Odessa after this horrific incident. So, but again, that's...
Those police folks, you know, the people that were literally standing there watching these people die and doing nothing about it. It's not stopping any of these people. Other videos, of course, have surfaced where you see this horde of Ukrainian nationalists conferring with police before they went into the plaza. Yeah, those police folks, those are the people.
Well, again, this tracks with the information we had from the Swiss NATO expert within the last 2 weeks, which we shared with you, which went viral, saying that as Ukraine had a regime change, right, there was this anti-Russian separatist sentiment that continued to bleed into official Ukrainian government and military.
Yeah. So where did she get this line? I mean, where did she get this crap? I mean, she used to work at the CIA, so maybe she got it fed to her there. I mean, where did she get this line that it was the Russians' fault? I mean, these guys gathering signatures out front in tents. Where did she get this? In fact, the puppet government in Ukraine hadn't yet even completed its bullshit independent inquiry into what happened. That's right. They didn't release the report in Ukraine until later that week. So how did the United States have this fabricated story about Russia all ready to go? It was as if it was served up to them. So a reporter then asks her about this and asks her specifically about, well, are you saying that these innocent people are to blame here?
Going forward, we think that restraint is important, but so is keeping law and order.
But it doesn't matter how many people die, those people brought it upon themselves, it's their fault. Is it what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that at all. In no way am I saying that. I'm saying that the fact pattern of what happens here matters. What I also said is that we applauded Prime Minister Yatsenyuk's steps that he took, to start an independent and thorough, credible investigation, and also to fire, I think, the police chief there that didn't take steps to protect these innocent civilians, regardless of who they supported. But the fact pattern of how this started and who started the escalation, who started the mob violence, matters if we're talking about how to prevent it in the future.
Let's just ask you on that specifically. The foreign ministry in Russia, in Moscow, has come out today and said that there are towns in eastern Ukraine which have been encircled by Ukrainian troops, and which are apparently facing a humanitarian disaster due to shortages of medicine and food. And they're also listing what they call mass-scale rights violations by what they say are ultra-nationalists in Ukraine. Could you comment on those reports, please?
Well, I think this is just the latest in the Russian version of events not matching up with what we see on the ground. The Ukrainian government has taken enormous steps to protect their people.
Oh.
Which people?
By the way, where is the press today on this question? Where is the press today asking those same questions? Saying, hey, we have reports that literally these people in the eastern, in Donbass and other areas have been surrounded by Ukrainian nationalists and they're being starved to death and shelled and killed. Can you ask? Well, that doesn't jive with what we're hearing over here at the U.S. State Department.
Right.
Oh, really?
And if there were an answer to this, it would be part of the narrative that we are being fed, that at one time, yes, Russian separatists were persecuted and undernourished, right? But since then, Zelensky and his government had fill in the blank, and now that's why we fight for them, right? But the complete gap in information there is telling.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely telling. And in fact, Harf's statements are typical of the lies and the propaganda used by the U.S. to perpetuate this lie. The official Ukrainian account of what happened is that these pro-Russian protests set themselves on fire. It was their fault. They were there gathering signatures, and then they decided to go up to the rooftops and take Molotov cocktails and throw it down on their fellow brethren who were there gathering signatures. Makes a lot of sense. Total lie. Of course, even though there was video that actually shows the opposite. Again, this was 8 years ago, this very day. Here is that video that no one accounted for at the time, right? These individuals are gathering here, coming into the plaza, and suddenly showing up and setting fire to these tents. They come out of look where they come from. Oh, they're here. They come out of nowhere. And there's a separate video showing them around the street corner talking to police officers and organizing before they ran into the plaza. Yelling, "We will not leave any person left alive." And then we hurl Molotov cocktails at the building. Did you see that? I don't know if you caught that one there. This is a Molotov cocktail being thrown at the building.
Well,
Yeah.
we didn't do anything.
We didn't do it. We didn't do it. And then, of course, but this is the line from the U.S. State Department, is that these people basically set themselves on fire. And that is also basically what the independent review that came out of Ukraine found. Independent, non-biased review.
So Ukraine got to investigate itself.
Right.
And told us that all was well. That's shocking.
Yeah, shocking. And meanwhile, Euromaidan smiling, looking like he's having fun. Dying people who are up on the rooftops and on the ledges who are being forced out and have nowhere to go. And the police officers standing by doing absolutely nothing. Well, you might wonder, each year, like what happens? And actually, by the way, so, when she was talking, when that reporter was asking that question about the eastern Ukraine and these reports of these, the separatist regions here, that's the way that the West portrays it. Again, my interview with Eva Bartlett, where she talks about that, and the constant shelling for 8 years of these attacks, and the Western media has been relatively silent. I mean, this day they're asking about it, but then they just get shut down. They don't ask about it anymore. But it's happening. In fact, it's happened even this weekend. By the way, look at this from Nita Byzantina, who is a journalist. She says, here is Makivaka. I hope I'm saying that right. We have a lot of Russian and Ukrainian viewers who watch us, and I get emails from you. So if I'm saying it wrong, this is in the breakaway Donetsk People's Republic, an unexploded Ukrainian Uragan in the courtyard of a residential building. This has been happening for 8 years. And then here is what happened this weekend. You won't see these things in the Western media. She writes, yesterday, the armed forces of Ukraine fired BM-22 Grads, these rockets, at the center of the Petrovsky district in Donetsk. 1 dead, several wounded, dozens of houses, a school, a kindergarten were destroyed. Same source as above that provided these photos. This is what happens. Now, each year at this time, after this massacre in Odessa, the families of the victims hold ceremonies to memorialize those people who were brutally killed by the Ukrainian nationalists. Here are photos of these past memorials in years past. I'll just have a few of these photos where they gather to put up pictures of their loved ones who were burned alive in this building. They gather photos, they hold vigils and so forth. They bring photos of their family. Many of these people, by the way, they were just like walking by. They weren't even a part of anything. They were just walking by and got forced into the building and killed. But tonight, on this May 2nd, in Odessa, they won't be allowed to honor these family members there because
For the first time.
Because they are under a new curfew tonight. The government says, sorry, you're not allowed to honor those people that our military killed. So you got to stay indoors. You can privately grieve to yourself, but you can't go outside. And you certainly can't go to this building. You can't go to the trades building and do anything there. We don't want you there. Since then, though, in 2014, the Western media has been silent, totally silent, where for 8 years, the Ukrainian military has continued to carry out brutal attacks on the people in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, as we showed you photos from the People's Republic, or the Donetsk People's Republic. So it is with this awareness of this anniversary of this massacre that Democrat Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Adam Schiff decided to pay a visit to Ukraine over the weekend. This kind of surprised a lot of people. I think it surprised all of us. She donned of course, Nancy Pelosi put on her best Ukrainian blue and war zone high heels and showed up in Ukraine to shake hands with Vladimir Zelensky. What she told him is that, hey, your fight is our fight, and we're going to keep supplying weapons and assistance until Ukraine has won this war. Let that sink in for a moment. There was no talk of pushing for peace, no mention of a brokered settlement agreement, no mention of the Odessa massacre, Just a reminder that Uncle Sam is here to funnel billions to you as long as you keep doing our bidding.
At a high interest rate, just so you know. You
Yeah.
will be paying these things back.
Yeah. Pay these back with interest. On the same weekend that Nancy Pelosi was in Ukraine, the puppet media, the Associated Press, this is amazing. This part of the story blows me away. The Associated Press, the puppet media, continued to normalize this type of barbaric behavior. In fact, the AP was doing a ride-along with Ukrainian security forces. Yes, the SBU. I wish I was making this up. The SBU are the same security forces listed on the State Department's own website as a violator of human rights for making people disappear and for killing journalists.
Wait, the United States State Department calls out the SBU as a undesirable group, yet the Associated Press is like, hey, we're going to embed with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the State Department's 2019 write-up on the Ukrainian military and the SBU specifically is very interesting reading. It's about 75 pages, and I highly recommend. I mean, you could look it up. I literally just put State Department, SBU. I can't remember what the other word was. I put in Google. It's right there. Read the whole thing. Yeah, it's very damning. It would have
because the State Department did believe this at one point.
Yes, 2019.
Yes, in recent history.
And even earlier. I mean, we've covered the SBU here on the show. I covered it with a video I did over the weekend, and the SBU is listed on the State Department's website. You can click on the different regions for war crimes and humanitarian and human violations, and it's listed on the State Department's own website as the SBU. But now, again, this sort of normalizing of things by the American press and the Western media is what's going on here. So the Associated Press does a ride along with these guys. I mean, you can't even make this up. And I can't even show you the video, but here's the sad part. If I show you the video, the Associated Press will file a copyright claim against us. So I don't want to show you the video, but I'm going to show you some images of it. So here are some images of it. They're following the SBU as they literally round up a guy and his wife at their apartment. Roundup at Ukrainian security services in the northeastern city of Kharkiv are moving to arrest a man suspected of collaborating with Russia. And what was his great crime?
Being Russian? Being an ethnic Russian?
Posting social media posts about how, hey, I do not like these Ukrainian nationalists. And also denigrating the Ukrainian flag. So
you can't say that.
This is the democracy that we are upholding. They show up at his house, pull him out. By the way, and I guarantee you, the only reason this guy wasn't killed is because the Associated Press was there. If the Associated Press wasn't there, we know from reports that there have been a number of journalists and people killed by the SBU. So this is not at all. And plus, there's plenty of reporting from Dan Cohen and others who report on this. So here is what Dan Cohen writes. AP accompanies Zelensky's SBU thugs as they kidnap Ukrainians who speak out against the regime. This is an obvious propaganda piece designed to normalize crushing dissent. Imagine how they act when the cameras aren't on. Yeah. And he says, contrary to the AP's portrayal, the SBU tortures and murders its victims in an underground prison. I've obtained testimony from 2 survivors, one of whom said they had burning hot needles.
Oh, my God.
One of whom said he had burning hot needles stuck under his fingernails and a gun held to his head during interrogation. Another, my article details how the CIA-trained SBU agents oversaw ultra-nationalist civilian torture prisons with the Ukrainian national anthem playing and forced them to denounce Putin on camera. They said it was like a small Guantanamo, a survivor told me. And of course, these are images from that video where they pull this guy out of his apartment, and the Associated Press is there to capture it all. And the Associated Press gloats about this on its website with this story, like they're getting Putin sympathizers. Yeah, and they make him, in front of him, they show him his social media post. The guy literally humiliates him, pulls it up on his phone. He's like, did you make this post here praising Russian president, calling for secession and insulting the Ukrainian flag? He says, yes, but I don't believe it anymore. He says, you better not believe it. He's basically like, you changed your mind. Yeah, I changed my mind. Yeah, I changed my mind because you have a gun pointed at my head.
Because you're threatening my family.
Yeah, I changed my mind too. I probably would wet my pants. These thugs show up with full body armor and machine guns pointing at my head because of a social media post I made. This is the same group, the SBU, that arrested journalist Gonzalo Lira and held him for 7 days against his will.
This is the democracy that Kamala Harris told us to support.
That's why you have to pay more for your gasoline. Don't you know that? This is why you need to pay more for everything.
This is when America defends her freedoms.
Because this is Putin's price hike. So this is how you support these people. This is democracy in action, right? This is what they do. This is how they act when the cameras are on. But Dan, I encourage you all to read Dan Cohen's great piece on this because he goes into much more detail about how the SBU operates. So Nancy Pelosi left Ukraine. She's now in Poland tonight, which is the perfect staging ground to funnel more money and weapons into this disgusting war. And the continued BS and propaganda continue to flow out of this war zone.
It does seem like there are cracks, though, in these stories that are starting to this we must support Ukraine. Ukraine is only good. Russia is only bad. How long can they keep this up? It's like they're holding up a pillar that's starting to topple.
Well, I mean, when we have shows like this, where we are able to get the news out and get out this information to the masses, that's why it's so important, guys, when you're watching this show. We found out actually that this is true. If you're watching our show live, like many of you are, if you actually hit that like button, it actually sends it out to more people. And it sends it out to people who are likely to want to share this information because we need to get this message out. The Western media, I mean, you see it right in front of your face. I mean, you literally see the Associated Press doing ride-alongs with the SBU. And you also had the Associated Press, by the way, who put out that garbage story about the maternity ward being attacked. That has since been debunked.
Yes.
But the Associated Press makes no retractions, corrections, and it's the Associated Press. I mean, this is like supposed to be held up as the highest order.
But as someone who continues to scan headlines, I do feel like between February and March, the headlines were constantly telling us that Ukraine was standing its ground. There was some glimmer of hope still coming, and it would highlight anything that they would conceive of as Ukrainian success as pushing back Russians now. But it does seem that the press is coming to see that, look, the separatist regions will become Russia in short order. This is how this is going to end. It could end differently if leaders decided to speak, but no press is holding any leader to the fire, but happy to attend any picture opportunity, right?
Well, this is the cover of, because we're not holding anybody to the fire. Here's the cover of Time magazine today. I mean, they're not even pretending. They're not even pretending that they're objective. I mean, literally, yes. I mean, this is their front cover. How Zelensky leads. Like, let's light him. Let's do this nice lighting inside the compound with the president and his team. We're right there. We're right there with you. And Pelosi's right there with you, too. She's ready to walk with you, and she's ready to be right by your side and shake your hand and wear my Ukrainian blue. And there's Adam Shifty Schiff in the background. Can I shake your hand as well? And let's have a meeting here. Let's not discuss peace, or anything else. Let's discuss how we're going to get you this $33 billion this week.
Yes.
And by the way, that's what she has to go back to Washington now and try to deal with, because it's not totally in the can, but it's going to pass. But she's got to work now in Congress to get this $33 billion passed and to continue to funnel this money there. Because
Congress will not do us the courtesy of declaring war, even though they're behaving as such, right?
Right.
So if they don't declare war but continue to, it's not going to matter to any opposition. Russia, it does continue to consider this partisan moves, choosing a side. And
I think it's also true, like Caitlin Johnstone wrote a piece today about this, where she talked about Western civilization being organized around winning U.S. info wars. She says the U.S., I feel the need to reiterate once again that the censorship we're seeing about Ukraine is of a whole new kind than anything we've seen before. There's no pretense that it's done to save lives or protect democracy this time around, or just we need to control the thought that people think about this war. Once it's accepted as disinformation or misinformation, must be curtailed from above. Government and tech institutions took that as a license to decide what's true and what's false on our behalf. We know this because now they're just openly propagandizing and censoring us about a war.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening.
In the budget, they said as such that we intend to sort of ordain journalists with this money if you let us give it to Ukraine.
Right.
We will ordain journalists and send them there to conquer misinformation, which you can see that from the other side, which is to give you information we think is right.
Yeah. It's so sad to think about this anniversary, too, 8 years. And as this tweet says here, no international criminal court investigations, no sanctions, no noise at the United Nations Human Rights Wing, no noise in the mainstream media about the atrocities, all because the perpetrators had Uncle Sam's blessings. Yep, that's how it goes. That's exactly how it goes. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. You know, we've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website, to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.